Good afternoon, everyone, from the University of Hawaii's Center for Southeast Asian Studies. I'm Miriam Stark, and right now I'm the director for the center. I'm very pleased to be welcoming you all today. Dr. Jane Ferguson is a senior lecturer in anthropology who joins us from the Australian National University School of Culture, History, and Language, and its ANU College of Asia and the Pacific. Dr. Ferguson, official member of MA and PhD, the latter in 2008, concentrates her research in Southeast Asia, and specifically Myanmar, northern Thailand too. Dr. Ferguson publishes broadly on research themes that include, but are not limited to, borderlands, insurgency, ethnic politics, and popular culture, including digital media, musical genres, and passenger aviation. I would like to point out that her last book was Repossessing Shan Land, and that her work ranges across disciplinary boundaries. I think she's technically an anthropologist, but she's also kind of like a historian, and she embraces cultural studies wholeheartedly. Jane has published on flight attendant masculinities, grass aesthetics among northern professional musicians, ethnic nationalism, gender, social change. My recent favorite in 2022 was her article entitled "Shake It Like Elvis, Win Oo, the culturally appropriate heartthrob of the Burmese socialist years." One can also see, however, looking at education record, that she likes movies. So today it's our deep honor to co-host this launch of her newly published University book entitled "Silver Screens and Golden Dreams, a Social History of Cinema." This book, as you've probably read, traces the veins of Burmese popular movies across three periods in history: the colonial era, the parliamentary democracy period, and the Ne Win Socialist years. Please join me in welcoming Dr. Ferguson to the University of Hawaii at Manoa. Come here. But you're being recorded, so you have to come over here.
I know, but we save the lays until after because there's other days.
No, I have to give it to you now. Sorry. We get more later.
Later. Yeah.
Here.
Okay, thank you so much, Miriam, Dr. Stark, card-carrying archaeologist, I believe, and clarinet player extraordinaire. I'm really delighted to be here, and it's really special. This is an amazing, with so many heartfelt and lovely events coming together. I couldn't have asked for more, and I was going to say the best day ever, but I might have the best week ever. Yeah, but there's a popular proverb, I'm sure you've all heard it. It takes a village to write an academic book. Oh, okay, that popular. They're all, but I'm so delighted in this. There are so many village people. Although you didn't in costume, you know who you are. You are my construction worker, my cop, my, let's see, who else?
Indian.
Oh, my chief. Don't say, yeah, my chief, my soldier, and my flight attendant. I support the Association of Flight Attendants Union here. You'll see my union pin. So all of you, and the village people do include a flight attendant. They've always been changing personnel since they started. So anyway, the book is about the history of popular entertainment in Burma and thinking about what that means from 1990 till 1980s. So on specific period in modern Burmese history. So from the colonial period, the advent of cinema, to the parliamentary democracy period after colonial independence, and then finally to the Ne Win Socialist between 1962 and 1988. I necessarily stop at 1980 because I'm focusing on the Black and white cinema industry. So it's also not a studies. I'm not doing textual readings, sorry. It's a social history book. It's thinking of what a movie is, both as a work of art, as a creation, but also as a capitalist commodity. So it's these two aspects of movies that put it at the center of the mainstream. So thinking about ideas of cultural authenticity, local music, anti-colonial nationalism, gender, all of these major themes that are a part of everyday life and social history, but what movies mean within them. And so technology, gender, culture, authenticity, modernity, how can we think about social history through movies? And the Chicago Sun-Times movie critic, Roger Ebert, I'm not sure if any fans of Siskel and Ebert out there, he once said, if you look at a movie a lot of people love, you will find something profound, no matter how silly the movie may seem. So what about Myanmar? What about Burma? What happens when we look at the history of their? So first of all, thinking stereotypes of what Myanmar and how Burma is presented in the popular media today, or even within scholarly works. I got these phrases from different scholarly works about Burma during the socialist period. They would write about it as a hermit state, isolated, hermetically sealed, frozen in time, cut off from the outside world. And because of this stereotype, and it's the stereotype that renewed the coup of General Mao lying against the quasi-civilian government and then renewed fighting, is that these old stereotypes come back again. So what does it mean to focus on popular entertainment? I mean, this is another aspect of the stereotypes about Burma in scholarly discourse and in the popular media, or as I summarize it, I call it the soldiers or monks approach to Burma studies, because there's a problem of a socialist government, an oppressive government, a censorship regime, and the longest running military government in modern history is in Myanmar. By the way, I use Burma, Myanmar interchangeably. It's not a political stance. But also Buddhist studies will look at the religion. So on the one hand, this is also a masculine-based history or popular understanding of the country. But then what does it mean to study popular entertainment in that era? And even with Burma itself. Okay, first of all, I just want one quick statistic. Between 1920 and 1980, looking at release statistics, there were 2,600 popular movies made in Burma. So very much going against that stereotype of a place that's isolated. As a thriving local industry, entertainment means a lot to people. And also within Burmese history, you not have people praying to the CSEAS staff, but that's actually a bronze bust of an early filmmaker, a film director named U Thuka. So modern film stars and film directors, this is Jotu, he's paying homage to the great antecedents, the fathers of Burmese cinema, as they're written about, since has been going since the early 20th century. And then also they have these panels within Burmese cinema to honor the original independentists. So this is the political heroes. The film industry is looking to create movies with political intentions. And also within Burmese film history, you have homage to, for example, the father of Myanmar's movies, Uong Maung. He made the first feature film in 1920. And here's a scene from the anti-colonial nationalist movie, Boykata. And this was the first film director. His name was Utokji. And what's interesting, when I was first reading books about him, I thought he just looked like that. And they put the caption that he was the first film director. And then later I realized he also starred as the villain in the first film. So part of me wonders, it's like, okay, they were shooting the film and like, oh no, the villain didn't show up. Whatever shall we do, Mr. Director? So anyway, what do you folks think? Should I swipe left or right? Okay, I'll swipe left. Anyway, so this is the stage bill for the first film. It premiered at Royal Cinema It was owned by some Gujaratis from Barbodhan, and it was actually mostly South Asian and East Asian entrepreneurs who owned the cinema halls in Burma. They were not indigenously owned until 1937 was the first Burmese-owned cinema hall, but it was Burmese production companies that made films that local people wanted to see. So they engaged this first film. It premiered on October 13th, 1920, and October 13th is celebrated to this day as Cinema Day in Myanmar, because that was the day this major film premiered. And they have the English stage bill. You have the Wednesday, October 13th. I'm sure it was auspicious in many ways. And other early films, I mean, the first film with sound came out in 1932. It was a co-production with Bombay filmmakers. And then in 1935, these filmmakers, they flew to Japan in order to work with, PCL, Photochemical Laboratory, which became Toho Studios, to co-produce on location the first Burmese-Japanese collaboration. And with the advent of sound on film technology, okay, there's going back a little, who remembers watching like film strips in school? Yeah, so it was like, you have the film and then you'd have the tape on the side, and then when it goes bing, whoever was the teacher's pet got to advance or no, not whoever was teacher's pet, whoever volunteered to advance the film would do so. So there's three kinds of film in Burma. First of all, you have the silent era where you'd have an orchestra playing on the side. And for Burmese audiences, they used traditional Burmese court music. So imagine watching Charlie Chaplin with Burmese court music. And oftentimes they would have really joker characters, because in traditional Burmese theater, it's kind of de rigueur, or of the rigor, as the French would say, to shout back at the screen or to shout back at the entertainment. You'd have this back and forth. So you'd have your lupiet, you'd have your jokers within the orchestra. And there was one man named Abdullah. He was a drummer. For some reason, drummers tend to be the jokingest ones in the ensembles, but he would, Bowa was the equivalent of the Lone Ranger in Burmese cinema. And when Bowa was about to be ambushed, Abdullah would say, "Hey, look out behind you." And everybody would just roar laughing when he got attacked. These sorts of things that those of you familiar with Rocky Horror Picture Show know, that part of the entertainment of talking back to the screen is not because you think the characters are going to really change their behavior, but because you're having fun with your friends in the cinema. So Abdullah gained a reputation for doing this. I had read a book by one of the cinema hall pianists. And another aspect too is that Burmese traditional tuning for the piano is different. So depending on who was coming to the cinema, they would have to retune the pianos. And so the strings got a whole lot more stretch than your average piano. But anyhow, this particular film, which I write about in the book, it's based on a Mon. So it's an ethnic minority folktale about the story of a Nat, a spirit named Ushinji. And the film itself, The Harpist, is about, animating that particular story. But what's interesting is that they replaced the Mon names and then also use a Burmese style harp. And it's one of the early sound on film talkies. So, okay, I realize I backtracked, got ahead of myself here. The three types of, first you have the silent films with the live orchestra. Then they'd call it sound on disc. So essentially it would be a record player separate to the film. And so they'd have, and then finally the atantwet, which means a full-on talkie, where the sound is engineered on the film itself. So you have to have different camera equipment to do a talkie. So that's a big technological difference. And those kind of talkies only got started in the 1930s in Burma. And Songdo Shin, the harp player, was an early movie of that particular genre. And another thing that I've noticed, speaking of ethnic minorities, the Shan are the most numerous ethnic minority within Burma. And an interesting point about appropriation and stereotyping, and this is something I had done fieldwork amongst Shan people, and when they talk about the history of Burmese movies, they often express annoyance. The villains, they're always wearing Shan style pants in the movies. So, here's the 1920 film, and throughout the colonial eras and then through the 70s, they would always put Shan style pants on the bad guys. And in addition to this, now I'm skipping to the parliamentary democracy era, because what I have 25 minutes left? Okay, perfect. Oh, I can't. Oh, I can read it on mine. So there was at independence, there was the problem for Myanmar that the Union of Burma, that it was amalgamating former frontier areas, which had been indirectly ruled under the British colonial period. So there's this problem is if you're annexing different territories and different people, how are you going to make people get along? And we can see that Burma did not exactly thrive at that project with the longest running civil war in modern history, but the presentation of ethnic minority peoples on the silver screen, it often both reflects popular discourse about it, but also it can influence the way people think about ethnic minorities as well. And so this was probably the most famous Shan woman, Shan actress in Burmese history through the late 1940s and during the 1950s. But look at how she's described by a quotation in her funeral book. Oh, her Shanness is what gives her a light and pure complexion, and the innocence and surprise that she offers. It is a kind of pretty naivete. Would you see that as positive? Yeah. Well, looking back at it with 2024, well, from 2024, like with 2024 eyes, that's a lot of eyes on an animal. But looking back at that we can see how that's problematic, but it's also looking at ethnic Shan people and saying, oh, their accents are so cute. They're simple people from the mountains. And for a lot of Shan people who were fully literate, proud of their culture, bilingual in Shan and Burmese. I have only met 2 Burmese people in my life that could speak Shan. Most of the time, it's the minority that has to learn the majority language. And so being portrayed this way, they would find it rightfully condescending. And again, it depends on the context as well. A lot of Shan people, of course, were delighted that one of their own became a big movie star as well, but depending on how you look at it. So around the time of World War II, Burma had one of the biggest media scenes in Southeast Asia, and arguably the biggest movie scene in Southeast Asia. I don't know if there's any Philippine studies people who will. Oh, okay, we could debate on that. But also around the time of World War II, throughout Burma, there were over 440 built brick and mortar cinemas. And then in the countryside, they would have outdoor cinema as well. And so it became a popular thing with families to bring their bamboo mats and go and sit and watch the outdoor movies. And there was often a conflict sometimes if there were too many advertising reels that were shown in the middle of the movie, interrupting, the dramatic scenes. Whereas in the West, whereas in England, I guess it's popular to throw rotten tomatoes, yeah? Well, in Burma, you throw a cat at the screen because the cat shreds the screen. That's a secret tip that's not in the book. So you get to know the secret menu, all of you at home and in the room. So for the rest of my presentation, you could guess what's going on there. I'm going to talk about the remake. So this is Burmese remakes of popular movies. And thinking about what a remake is, for those of you who were alive in the 1980s, you might remember 3 Men and a Baby. That particular popular movie was a Hollywood remake of the French movie. Or for those of you who are interested in porn parodies, you might be familiar with the genre-defining movie called Shaving Ryan's Privates. The point being is that it's using the notoriety of the existing film to expand the market and to go into new local commodities and to attract different viewers of different types. But the issue about the remake, if you've seen a remake of an existing movie or one that you've seen before, how is it different? How is it the same? What kind of decisions does the director make in order to do a remake? You know, you can think of various television shows that are spin-offs or how sequels are, you know, playing on the notoriety. I mean, I think by now, or actually anybody from Kauai would know about Jurassic Park quite well, or for senior flight attendants at LAX. Oh, sorry. But that in Jurassic Park, we know by now, audiences know by now that it's probably a bad idea to hatch dinosaur eggs. But we still keep going to watch the movie. So we don't always need to see a new plot to be thoroughly entertained. All right, that was and in Burmese, the concept of the remake. So at the top, it says the Burmese way to remake. And in the books, it'll even talk about, some of the cinema history books will talk about the Hollywood movie that the Burmese movie is a remake of. So yeah, they would refer to it as Minyampu, or referencing Badapiang, which is just translation. But also within Burmese popular music, there's a long tradition of kopitachin. In other words, songs that are copied from international songs, sometimes translated, sometimes appropriated. I was playing some of them earlier, thinking about how making new lyrics with Burmese meanings and played and performed by Burmese musicians. So this is the same about Burmese remakes. So I'm going to present, well, yeah, Salty O'Rourke. So today I'm just going to compare two love triangle remakes. So these are just some examples from the film history books. So yeah, Salty O'Rourke, and that's a Burmese rendition of Memoirs of a Geisha. And instead of a Japanese geisha, they have a Shan woman as the star. So again, thinking about what Orientalism means or what cultural difference means, it has to be made relevant to mainstream audiences in Burma in order to be a hit. So this particular movie, Dr. Ang Ja-u, was a 1957 smash hit. It was the biggest hit for the country, and it won multiple awards. Burma even has its own Academy Awards, but it's originally based on the Hollywood movie from 1947, Nora Prentice. And then it was remade into a Bollywood movie called Sholay in the early 1950s. And then finally, the Burmese version, Dr. Ang Ja-u, and it was from a Burmese film magazine. I got this Yoshinbireta film play. The movie is not strictly taken from the others. From the beginning to the end, it has been changed to show Burmese customs, culture, and Burmese life. Oh, and by the way, I'm just going to show this in short GIFs because when Nora Prentice came out, Variety magazine called it an overly long melodrama. So the movie opens to a scene of a dash man, Dr. Ang Ja-u, played by Mau Mau Ta, dancing the tango at a nightclub. The talented singer and dancer named Mary, played by Mary Mint, takes an interest, asking his buddy Charlie about status. The man lies and says the doctor is a bachelor. In fact, Dr. Ang Ja-u is married with 2 children, but is bored with domestic life, having married his wife as a family favor. By day, Dr. Ang Ja-u is a cardiologist and operates a small clinic in Rangoon. And I found this fascinating that you have San Francisco, Bombay, and Rangoon, yet they all have Venetian blinds. And they also all portray smoking doctors. I guess it was more common for cardiologists in the 40s and 50s to smoke. Anyway, anyway, through coincidence, Mary has an accident and ends up in his clinic. The sexual tension between doctor and patient in the examination process reaches fever pitch. Later, they begin an affair. I mean, there's some knee squeezing there. Dr. Aung Ja-woo's dedicated wife and children wait patiently at home while he stays out later and later. One day at the park, Mary is surprised to meet the doctor with his 2 children in tow. Oops. Her shock and annoyance at her lover for not having disclosed his family status is evident. To allow him to save face in front of his family, Mary does not confront him. She decides to break off the affair and departs Rangoon for the southern seaport town of Mye in Tanintharyi region to take up a new job. Dr. Aung Ja-woo makes the sinister decision to fake his own death by switching his identity with that of a recently deceased patient, Baji Timpe. So this is like the side advantage of having your own cardiology clinic. You have access to corpses. So he drives Baji Timpe corpse, remote location, lights his car with corpse afire, and then escapes to join Mary in Mye. His Rangoon family mourns his death. Although the romance is happy at first, it quickly devolves as Aung Ja-woo is enveloped in his own feelings of guilt, anxiety, and even jealousy that Mary might leave him for another man. He refuses to go out in public. Mary has a job in a local theater and can earn some income, but Dr. Aung Ja-woo becomes enraged at the owner of the theater troupe, accusing him of having an affair with Mary. And in a drunk fit of rage, Aung Ja-woo attacks men at the theater and escapes, driving a jeep along winding roads. He crashes into a ravine. His vehicle bursts into flames. Now, the one in the lower right corner, that's not one of the 3 originals. It's actually Toonces, the cat that could drive a car. And because I noticed a striking similarity with Aung Ja-woo and Toonces, so I wondered if Saturday Night Live in the early 90s was watching Burmese movies. But anyway, Aung Ja-woo is rescued by police, taken to hospital, but upon recovery, his face is horribly disfigured. He assumes a new identity, Ko Ye Maung, and Mary vouches for him as his wife. Oh. So anyway, oopsie, sorry about that. My hands are sweaty, so it's making me, okay. Oh, they're not moving. There we go. At the crash site, police investigators find a monogrammed pen of Dr. Aung Ja-woo, linking him back to the supposed murder of Dr. Aung Ja-woo in Rangoon. He is brought back to Rangoon for trial, though refuses to speak on his own defense. Both his wife and Mary attend the trial. Yeah, love triangle in the courtroom. The prosecuting lawyer convinces the court that the disfigured Ko Ye Maung is responsible for the murder of Dr. Aung Ja-woo, and he is sentenced to it. So not exactly happy ending, but not bad for an overly long melodrama, as Variety had said. So in comparing the remake, in this case, I noticed that the previous 2 movies, the Bollywood movie and the Hollywood movie, don't have the doctor dancing the tango. So why would a Burmese director, if it's supposed to be Burmese through and through, include a scene of tango dancing? I mean, isn't it interesting in the parliamentary democracy period, they want to showcase tango. I mean, yeah, it's not from Burma, is it? Last I checked. But it's actually because the star of the movie, Mau Maung Ta, was an accomplished ballroom dancer. And first of all, if you're going to showcase tango, you've got to have somebody that can do it, right? So he had the skills to do that. And they wanted to show that they're making a cosmopolitan, internationally savvy movie. So having a tango scene makes it, fun and sexy to watch. And you can see how it would make for a terrific intro to the film. So that was parliamentary democracy period, talking about the remake, the Burmese remake versus the Hollywood one. But following the military coup and the change in governments towards the Revolutionary Council regime and then the Burmese Socialist Program Party, you have the change in structure, both the economic structure of the movie industry, as well as the ideological nature of the film industry as well. And just to make a really important point, I was able to find attendance statistics that between 1962 and 1969, movie attendance actually went up about 40%. So, you can think about how the movies are so important for people in a difficult economic or political situation, that having an escape is important, and people still want to attend the movies, and maybe they can't afford to do more expensive leisure activities, but they would still go to the cheap seats at the movies, or the traveling cinemas would be hired to play at temple festivals, that sort of thing. I'm not sure if those statistics included temple festival attendance. But anyway, here's how the Ne Win Revolutionary Council regime started to change the media. So the Motion Picture Corporation controlling and distributing all of the materials. So if you're going to make a movie, you have to submit your script to the censor board. And then once you get approval, then you would be given a certain amount of unexposed film to go and shoot your movie. And once you'd edited the movie, once you'd finished production and post-production or editing, you would have to resubmit it to the censor board for them to check again to see how it went. And then you would be given a censor license to be able to show it in public. And so that was the Film Council that was responsible for content of the movies. So the corporation controls the economy, the council controls the content, as it were. And then also they made equally rigorous press scrutiny board to make sure that the films or that all media was in line with the Burmese way to socialism. And another thing too was that a lot of privately owned cinemas, not all of them and not all at once, were nationalized. In other words, the government took them over and sent the private owners home packing, especially if they were owned by foreigners. They could no longer have foreign ownership of companies within the country. So this popular cinema, which is still standing today, known as Wazia, it used to be the Excelsior. And then once it was nationalized, it was made into Wazia. And in the film magazines, this is an important source that I used for my research, was, they would mention which cinemas were being nationalized, so I could kind of keep track of that. And then for the censor board, they have this laundry list of things that they're supposed to remove or things that are not allowed to be portrayed. So anything detrimental to Burmese socialist program, the ideology of the state, socialist economy, anything which might be harmful to national solidarity and unity, anything which might be harmful to security, etc. This is another one. Any incorrect ideas and opinions which do not accord with the times. So basically giving the censor board a carte blanche to cut what they choose to. And continued descriptions. I love number 7, well, love in any descriptions which, though factually correct, are unsuitable because of the time or the circumstances of their writing. Obscene, pornographic writing, any writing which could encourage crimes, blah, blah, blah. Libel and slander, okay, we can agree that libel and slander is not good anywhere, but they put it in one of the regulations. But the same year of the Revolutionary Council government, I saw this comic in a film magazine, which the caption says like, oh, on the way to Myanmar socialism, let's stop and take a rest for a little while. And so this is, a woman they call these Baumbi Pinchut, which would be like, I guess what we call those pedal pushers. Yeah, Baumbi Pinchut is like ass hugging pants. And, she's wearing clothes. The guy, he's got this collar turned up, playing the guitar. And so they have this idea of, what does the comic mean? Is it saying that this is appropriate for the Burmese way to socialism. We can still be stylish and socialist all at once. And of course, so the film magazines refer to Win as the James Dean / Elvis of the Burmese cinema. And in various books, they talk about him, or they talk about the years that he was acting between 1962 and 1988 as the Win years. And the interesting non sequitur is that corresponds with the Ne Win government. So it corresponds with socialist rule and the government, except he's in, okay, here we are, another example, Baumbi Pinchut, but he's got hot pants, and that's the Burmese word for it as well. They call them hot pants. And the next movie I'm going to talk about is the Gene Seberg Moment to Moment. What's it? A moment of surrender, then 1,000 moments of shock and suspense. The Burmese version of this, Tain Loa Momo Luen. So it's basically the story of a psychiatrist, his wife and his young child. He's a psychiatry professor. And this is the other thing too. It's an American family, and he goes on sabbatical to the French Riviera. I mean, is this something that comics do? Yeah, always. Yeah. And anyway, he's called away, and in the Burmese version, he's a psychiatrist for the army, and he's sent to Sitwe in the Rakhine state. So you have a similar story, but set in a Burmese context. And again, it's a Bamar people, ethnic majority, going to Rakhine state, which is well, principally at that time, or the movie portrays actually no local people or local languages. It's all in Bama rather than any Rakhine, let alone Rohingya language portrayed in this 1968 film. But anyhow, for both movies, and I guess I'll start with some GIF juxtaposition, is that I have the kid going and meeting a Navy man and bringing the Navy man to come and meet his mother because the father has been sent away for work to another town. And they engage in some tourism, and you can see some of the cinematic blocking. You can tell that this, scarf idea, and as the Navy man is getting to know the wife, you can see some, tying scarf around her head. That's a little bit suggestive. We're getting going there. Mm-hmm. And in the moment to moment, they sleep together and have an affair. And as you see in these scenes, kissy, kissy. Whereas the Burmese film, you can't have any on the mouth kissing. And in the Burmese version, he just confesses his love to her rather than having any hint of sexual activity. And then they get in a tussle. They happen to have a gun. Oopsie daisy. Oh, he's not actually dead. He has to, she throws him away into a ravine. I'm sensitive to time. And then the husband has to come back and, he's got amnesia, doesn't remember the incident, let alone the affair. And so the tension in the plot is whether the psychiatrist husband will get the interfering seaman to say whether or not he's had an affair. But one thing that Cloudy Sky, Tain Loa Momo Luen, has that Moment to Moment does not is an extensive scene of Chikang Pagoda complex in Rakhine State and explanations about the history of Buddhism. I mean, I guess we wouldn't expect that from a movie on the French Riviera, but this long didactic point about Bama history in Rakhine State is something that didn't appear in the previous Hollywood movie. And in other movies, like for example, the Burmese version of The Parent Trap, the 1962 movie, called in the Burmese version Nimwate, or Twin Hearts. Rather than having the girls meet each other at summer camp, they meet on a school trip where they're given important lectures about the progress of Burmese socialism and large-scale irrigation projects. They're taken to the oil drilling fields at Chao and told about the advantage of systematic oil extraction in order to build the socialist economy. And then, given all of these sorts of things. So I make the argument that part of the reason that the remakes differ in this sense is that these scenes are added for the purpose, or as I would call it, monosocialist glutamate, to make the movies more appetizing to the censor board. And so for my concluding points, thinking about the socialist era, is that the cinema, it still depended on audience attendance. You had to make good movies that people wanted to see. The movie production was still in private hands. So again, despite it being a socialist government, there's a capitalist dimension that movie producers needed to make money in order to stay in business. And so they still had gripping stories. They still had stylish heroes. They had sexy love triangle tensions, but there were new ideological choices like this. I think that this represents the socialist era, and comparing remakes and thinking about what's added tells us a lot about the ideological goals of the movie industry in Burma, and it's an entertaining litmus test as well. So thank you so much, and I look forward to your questions and comments. Thank you. Oh my gosh. So do you want to?
I'm just here to help, but if there are questions here in the room, then we'll welcome them. And then when we see whether anyone on Zoom has questions, I'll facilitate.
Okay, terrific. Thank you.
Yeah. So how much would a cinema ticket be in Burma, as opposed to the US, and has it skyrocketed the way ours has?
Yeah, well, there were always a huge gap, because even at the old cinema halls in colonial period, some of them would be like cinema palaces. They'd have 700 seats, and they'd have ground floor with benches, and they were really like loud and like stickier, and not just from Coke, all sorts of stuff. But those would be the super cheap seats. But the more expensive seats would be 25 times as much, and they'd have plush private boxes with attendants that would bring food, and then also separate bathrooms. So first of all, it depended on what class seats you get, and with the ones on the ground and really close to the screen being the cheap ones.
How much would that be?
Oh gosh. Well, just a few cents in the colonial era. I mean, it's really, it's quite affordable then. I mean, especially we're talking about 700 seats. And then also the cinema system for Burmese film producers, they would rent the whole cinema hall and then make money off of ticket sales, but the cinema hall owner would make money off of selling snacks. It's similar to four-walling, or what they call it. Nowadays, they have, like at Wazia Film, you could go see a movie for the equivalent of 50 cents for the cheap seats. And I don't know what the expensive ones go. I mean, also there's rampant inflation, but the air-conditioned ones, it would be more like $4 or $5. But those are prices those are like 2019 prices. There's been so much inflation in the past few years. I haven't looked up recently, but that's a terrific question, because it was something that was really popular and accessible to a lot of different people. Yeah, sorry. Okay.
Yeah, okay. Thank you for the talk. It was really fascinating. And I guess I just hadn't realized how much that, especially maybe in the early years, there was of remakes. And I'm just kind of curious, like, is that a common thing across the world? And is it a production issue? Is it an audience issue? Like, why is it that there's this focus on remakes in the early stages of film industry?
Well, I mean, most movies, I mean, how many times have you like read the book and gone to see the movie and then argued about whether the book is better or not. And so, you know, again, that's adapting an existing story and then putting it on the screen. And I don't know for exact percentages, but like, for example, Bollywood, Indian cinema is repeatedly critiqued for making so many remakes. Like they have a remake of Kill Bill called Kill Dil. And yeah, there's, yeah, and this is the other aspect that this is a reason I wanted to explore remakes in this book, is because some like hardcore authentic cinephiles see the remake as a cheap copy and that you're just stealing somebody else's story and making it anew. But if you're talking about social history, it's like, well, what does it mean that they're doing it? And what can the remake say about wanting to engage stories from overseas and that sort of thing? So, and it's rampant within Hollywood as well. And, you know, buying the rights to an existing story, or, you know, Hollywood totally appropriating somebody else's story and repackaging it. So there, and also the aspect of wanting to see something that's an escape, like how many road trip movies are there? It's a familiar, you know, archetype. Or, you know, how many love triangle movies are there? How many shoot 'em up type movies, happy ending, you know? So there's an aspect where if you build something on a familiar or popular story, you're going to get popular audiences. If you make something that's too obscure or too artsy or boring, you know, you might get a few nerds, but you're not going to make a lot of money. So, you know, it's endemic. I mean, I'm talking about the cultural mainstream. So thinking about what it means in Burma. Yeah. Yeah.
I focused on Bollywood for.
Oh, terrific.
Yeah. So, and growing up in India, I saw a lot of these films. So there's a remake of Sholay in 1975.
That's the spaghetti Western, and I think it has a different plot
more
structure.
Yeah, right.
Yeah.
But so much of what you showed really reflects 1950s, like Raj Kapoor films, the Shri Jaj Sogis that was in 1955.
Right.
So,
okay.
My question is, in India, they also took, they were influenced by the soundtrack. So, for example, Mozart's 40th Symphony, where the motifs were taken from that and put into Indian song. Did that happen in? Hugely,
because film songs and also A1, one of the major studios, it was the equivalent of Burma's Hollywood for a number of years, that they were also a record company as well. So there would be film songs that would go along with the movie, obviously. And they would even sell, like in the film magazines, I would see the lyrics sheets, because it was also a thing for audiences to do, was to sing along with the movie. And the film songs became popular hits in their own right. So the Cloudy Sky movie, Tain Loa Momo Luen, it's actually a popular Win U song in its own right as well. So, you know, Footloose, Flashdance, we can think of various movies where they have these iconic songs, and yeah, a lot of similarities across that. I mean, some key differences as well. The cinema, Burmese and India, because Burma being formerly a province of India, their cinema industries were closely intertwined, and most of the cinema halls, about 3/4 of them in the 1930s, were owned by Madan Cinemas, the ones in Rangoon. So there was that economic control aspect. But there were differences in that, like early Burmese films had high-class women stars, whereas early Indian films, it would be either a man playing the woman's part, or it would be a Eurasian or a prostitute, because a high-class woman couldn't appear on early film in India. So there's a gender difference.
There was also a lot of, there was a large Jewish community in North India, and a lot of the women in that community who were had big names in theater also bridged into Bollywood.
In Burma as well, and there were some Baghdadi Jews involved in early Burmese cinema.
Exactly.
Yeah,
there was a large community. The flamenco
Tango.
dancing, the tango dancing, sorry, in Raj Kapoor's 1955 film Helen was the dancer.
Ah,
with
yeah,
him.
Helen
She
Richardson,
was
half Scottish, half Burmese, yeah.
Burmese.
Yeah, yeah,
right,
uh-huh.
right. So she was famous.
Yeah,
for
yeah,
that.
definitely. Yeah, and famous for being Burmese because
Yeah.
that would be exotic, you know. Well, anyway,
Or
we can go, we can continue.
Thank you. Stop. It was really enjoyed this. I've been doing some specific analysis of media studies as part of Empire.
Mhm.
Specifically looking here at the Edward Simon's Cane Fire documentary about how Hollywood used cinema as obfuscation, specifically for indigenous displacement and racial struggle. And you talked about the kind of infantilization of the Sean state, of the identity, of the computer racial defense state groups.
Mhm.
I was wondering if you could go a little bit more into very specifically while this was promoting socialism, how was it also trying to very much so either erase, infantilize, or indoctrinate indigenous minorities?
Yeah, that's a huge question. I can give you one particular example. And this was something that I saw in film magazines, like right at independence. So before the socialist era, they had said, now that we're a union of Burma, we have to be careful about Yazawin. We have to be careful about how we tell royal history because we don't want to create problems or we don't want to create dissolution. So in some, I mean, this is the other thing too, is that it's a very multivocal industry, and there were people that were specifically involved in making ethnic minority films called Tayinta films that gave visibility to ethnic minorities, and some saw that visibility as a positive aspect rather than total erasure of ethnic minorities. So there were some, you know, there's one particular, well, two directors that I focus on in the book that made these Tayinta films. And then also there were other cases in which the censor board was more savvy than the film director about ethnic minority issues. Usually there's this stereotype in the West that you love the struggling artist fighting against the authoritarian iron fist. But there was one case, it was making the mythical story of the relationship between the Burma king Anoyata and the Shan princess Salmon Lat. And they portrayed that, and the censor board said, don't call it Shanpi, call it Gamboza. You can't call it Shanpi because that would be under the subject of the Burma state. And there were some other changes that were actually more sensitive to the Shan before they allowed that film to be released. But nonetheless, because it was immediately after the Ne Win coup, at one of the there was an uprising at the cinema by Shan people because they were so mad that their mythical princess had been portrayed in such a negative light. So there's a lot of really interesting controversies in there and through there. And it's not all unidirectional or, you know, like, you know, straight propaganda, because there's always, I mean, this is kind of one of the ideas that I play with, that, you know, the how a film is read really depends on the audience and where they go with it too. So that's kind of what I bring to the social history or anthropology of this. Thank you.
Can I ask a question? And then I don't have a question.
You're the chair, you can.
I can do whatever I want. So my question is, who were the directors and who were the actors? And were those along ethnic or class lines?
The directors tended to be ethnic majority Burma men. And yeah, there, like even in in Bahan Township, northern Yangon, there's a cinema history museum, and I think it's fewer than 3% of directors have been women. So there, and also the way that Burmese film history is written, it always pays homage to the great teachers, the great directors, the great Sayaji of Burmese cinema. They're seen as the fathers of cinema. So part of that has to do with the press scrutiny board and the way in which film history has been shoehorned to fit the arc of nationalist history in Burma as well. But again, that's not the whole story. Yeah.
What is the golden dream part?
Oh, it just sounds kind of, well, the dream factory, and I play with that notion. And I I was talking to some Burmese friends of mine that are poets, and I wanted, because I'm working on a Burmese translation of it, and I wanted to give it a title that works in both English and Burmese. So it worked for anything that, you know, golden glimmer, the golden land, Suvarnabhumi, the great peninsula, this idea of a El Dorado, that kind of aura, that dream is getting at it. And then also the translation, it goes, Beka Boma, Eme. It kind of sounds, it's all aesthetics.
VP from Myanmar.
Hi.
Yeah, thanks for the presentation. This is really amazing. I have one question about kind of like the movie and kind of the nation, kind of like building, especially the military narrative of nation building. Over the past kind of like decades, we have seen a lot of movie star displacing, you know, as a kind of like military soldier and kind of like, you know, going battle to some of the ethnic armed groups.
Yeah.
Some of them are kind of like, you know, later on, you know, they get like kind of like, you know, Academy Award or something like that.
Yeah.
Was kind of wondering, is like, in what period that kind of like propaganda has began, and it was, I think, yeah, it would be interesting if you could kind of like give like a short kind of like answer on, you know, the 1988 coup and, you know, especially Ne Win era, how the military is kind of like using that kind of propaganda.
Okay, yeah, because I mean, even anti-colonial nationalists, you know, sought to plant ideas of a Burmese nation, like this 1935 film, Japan Yinpue, the Japanese daughter. That one foresees Burma having an air force. That's kind of the idea that they wanted to put forward, that a Burmese masculine hero as the center of it. In terms of war movies, like for example, throughout the 1950s, there were a lot of mainstream movies that were made showing Shan State as a Wild West, or it would be a Burmese soldier fighting against Kuomintang or fighting against Japanese, or in areas where they would be, like there's one called Shampi Yao Edeye, this popular figure, Josue. He was kind of the prototypical looks great, handsome in uniform type guy. And he has a relationship with a local Shan villager, falling in love with her while she's taking a bath in the river. Sounds kind of creepy. Well, anyway, that she ends up becoming like a Pocahontas type figure in relation to that. So yes, absolutely. And when did the soldier movies start? Right at independence.
Oh, I'm very interested in the censorship movement.
Okay.
And the films that didn't make it.
Yeah.
So I know there was a lot of self-censorship. So
Yes,
that
absolutely.
You would do your best to get it accepted. Do you have any sense of how many films didn't make it? And was there in any way a sort of subterranean people who are still kind of making
underground cinemas,
underground films, or was there any kind of discussion? Because the magazines that you're looking at, or the film journals, are going to themselves censor. I mean,
of course,
have open discussion of these matters. So was there kind of the subterranean conversation about these?
Yeah, I mean, that was the advantage of, I was able, when I first started doing research on this project in 2005, I met some old directors in their 80s who talked about working during the socialist era. And you know, sometimes they would kind of talk subtly or hush hush about it, but talking about how to get something through the censor board, first of all, they would laundry list some of the things because those guidelines are so vague. They would just say, oh, you can't have a woman smoking a cigarette. You can't have a woman drunk. You can't have sex before, you know, they rather than taking the vague guidelines, they'd talk about practical things that they couldn't put in. But another trick that they would do, they called it ngasa. They would put bait. They would put a scene that they knew the censor board would tell them to cut out. so that the censor board would feel good that they were doing their job. That would get cut, and then it would leave the film intact. Because there's another example. This is from the movie Chebo Wado Nunu, the Tender Are the Feet, where in a nightclub, a woman goes and she's dancing to the band. But you could see there's this awkward snap. She gets up to dance, and then the song plays, and then it's done, and you didn't get to see her dance, and you see other people coming and saying, "Oh, you're such a great dancer." It's like, how come the audience didn't get to see the dancing? It was because that one was censored. Also, in relation to that, a lot of the people on the censor board were filmmakers themselves, and they were doing their patriotic duty, or they were given an assignment that they had to be on the censor board. So, they would often be sympathetic in some ways. But also, one point I didn't mention earlier, that the censor board, if a film proved controversial, they'd always have the right to pull it out of the cinemas. So even after something was released, it was always a conditional release. And your question about underground cinema, that during the socialist period, I don't see much of that because it was so hard to get raw footage. And this is also kind of why I stop at 1980, because in the 1980s, you start to have VHS and magnetic tape being used to make movies. And they would have underground cinemas. They called them video yong, so it would be just like video hall, and people would pay entrance to those, and they would often be secret because all you'd need is a television set and a VCR. But those would usually be pornographic, not high art, not Shaving Ryan's privates.
In Hollywood, from the late 1930s and through World War II, there was a lot of difficulty to get raw footage to make films.
Yeah.
The Brits wouldn't allow them access to the raw footage.
Mm-hmm.
And then all of the, any of the companies to actually take the raw footage and help them put it together in the film were all in England. So did that happen? I mean, did that kind of ban on supply and resources affect Myanmar?
Yeah, well, there was originally, it was really hard to get raw footage in World War I because of the silver nitrate makes use of saltpeter, which is also used in gunpowder. So there was kind of a huge block in being able to get raw footage. There was, they used AGFA and Plus X film through the 50s. The government also still, this is the other thing too, it wasn't just Burmese movies in the cinemas. The government made so much money at importing Hollywood movies that they didn't want to cut the country off from its Hollywood movies because it was so popular and profitable for the government. In terms of the, which period are you talking about for?
From the late 30s all the way through World War II.
Because during World War II, there was a bit of a halt in film production. And this is in the 1930s, there were around 24 local film companies making movies in Burma, but there was a major halt during World War II. And also under the puppet regime, they had Japanese propaganda films, samurai films being played in the Burmese cinema. And one of the popular movie halls was renamed Sakura, and lots of changes to it. But thanks for the question.
You have a question?
Yes.
Hi.
Hi.
The Burmese version of the MPAA, or what was it called? The MPA? Just the MPA?
Yeah, the motion picture censor board, or
What date was it? The first October 13th, 19?
Yeah, October 13th, 1920 was the premiere of the first Burmese.
So how many films were produced in that short time? And what was there a rating system like the US version of the MPAA has today?
I don't know if they had a specific rating system like that. Also, because Burma was under British colonialism, it was British colonial censor boards that had been set up during that period. And interestingly, in each province, they'd have a different censor board. So they had a special one for Burma. And like one interesting example of that was because they import a lot of Indian films, and there was one called Buddha Dev, The History of the Buddha, by Dada Saheb Phalke, the famous first, sorry, I know it wasn't you, but you were talking about Indian cinema in the history of the Buddha, but it got censored for 3 reasons, and they put those reasons down that they didn't want to have Buddha being played by a human, that the Buddha in the movie didn't have a big enough entourage. And the 3rd reason was the Buddha in the movie looked too Indian and didn't look very Burmese, regardless of the provenance of the Lord himself.
What was the corruptions? I know that there is censorship, it's like,
Oh, yeah.
yeah.
Oh, huge, huge. Yeah. You could get things through with bribes, not just the pay po, not just tea money, but whiskey po, you know, whiskey money. Oftentimes, people who had friends on the censor board could get things through quickly. This is the other thing too about the censor board. The censor board didn't actually always watch the movies themselves. I interviewed some people who they were the daughter of somebody on the censor board, and dad said, "Here, watch this." You know, so there's a good deal of extended family outsourcing which took place. And another point about the censor board is that you had to pay a per page reading fee for the censor board to even read your script. So yeah, I mean, lots and lots of speed bumps on the way to make a movie. And this is also part of the reason in the 1960s and 70s, you see way more love triangle movies in Burma, was because those were seen as being safe and easy to get through the censor board. So there was a huge kind of genre shift. You could also make the argument, it's like when, you know, the political economy is in shambles, you kind of like to see a fun rom-com.
Great, anything else?
So,
Sorry.
yeah,
Oh.
snacks and champagne.
We do have, yes, I was going to say thank you and then welcome everyone and invite everyone to have snacks. Is that okay?
Of course, yeah.
Okay, I'm supposed to come over here, right, Emma? Somewhere I'm over here. Oh. Oh, I don't see me, but you see me. All right, so anyway, come back, please.
Okay.
We want to say thank you very much to Jane for coming and talking to us. It's been a real pleasure. And for people who are online, I'm sorry that you can't join us except virtually, but we are now going to really have snacks and celebrate with some non-alcoholic bubbly over here in this room. So thank you very much to everyone who joined us online, and we hope to see you next time. Bye-bye.